Good evening, welcome to Reality Check. Now this has been a week for new and exciting words. Well, we all heard about this word just a couple of days back, farrago. We all of course heard about that and spent some time trying to figure out what exactly that means. Now we know what that particular one means. But I'm going to pull out another word right now. And well, that's the word that you heard about right now, farrago. But let me just come to the other word now, which is backsliding. Democratic backsliding, to be more precise. And this is being defined as the destabilization of political and democratic institutions in a democracy, state-led destruction of political institutions in a democracy. This is what this is defined as. And this is becoming more common than you actually think. Now, you will remember there used to be a high point of democracy soon after the Berlin Wall fell and countries around the world became democratic. And we used to think that democracy is the way to go and nothing is going to ever stop it. But there are reasons now to be concerned. Yes, of course, many countries, perhaps most countries, are still democracies. But there is starting to be an erosion of some of the full democratic values that you have. And it is starting to happen across the world. Take a look at these figures from The Economist. The Economist Intelligence Unit says full democracies are down from 20 to 19 in 2016. So according to them, there are only 19 full democracies in 2016. The United States has been demoted, if you like, downgraded to the status of a flawed democracy. And in case you're wondering, where does India figure in that entire list? Well, here's the democracy index. It puts Scandinavian countries, Norway, Iceland, Sweden right on top of the list. New Zealand, Denmark doing quite well as well. United States is a bit further down. New Zealand's doing okay. It's at number 4. You have Denmark at number 5. United States comes in at number 21. And India is all the way down that list at number 32. Now, go all the way down, you'll come to Poland and many other countries that are actually there on that particular democratic index. Now, you are hearing examples of democratic backsliding virtually every day. And I'm not even getting into the most obvious cases like Russia or Turkey. Just take a look at what's been happening the last couple of days. Let's take a look at the United States, for example. In the US, Trump has fired the FBI chief, James Comey. Many people are saying that's one of the worst examples of democratic backsliding because the checks and balances that were so strong in the United States are now under threat if things like this start to happen. Look at the other steps that has been happening in the US. 2 other top officials Trump has fired. Both were probing him. Sally Yates, Preet Bharara. He's fired both of them. It's not just the US. Take a look at Hungary. President Viktor Orban, who's accused of authoritarianism now, attacking civil society across the board. NGO Freedom House says that Hungary now has the lowest democracy score in Central Europe, and this is one of the countries that was being celebrated as a democracy. Take a look at Poland. The ruling Law and Justice Party accused of using state broadcaster for propaganda. The Polish government's now wanting to centralize and administer all funding for state-funded NGOs. And of course, why are we talking about all of this? Let's be clear. There are concerns here in India as well, which I am going to come to a little later in the program. Well, let me now just start by welcoming some of the guests we have out here to talk about it. And I am going to come to India and I'm going to come about some of the concerns there as well. Dhruv Jaishankar joining us, Brookings Foreign Policy Fellow. Amy Kasman is with us, South Asia Bureau Chief of the Financial Times. Yogendra Yadav joining us as well, political scientist and of course co-founder of Swaraj Abhiyan. P.N. Vijay about to join us in a couple of minutes. Now, I just want to get you all in on this broader question of democratic backsliding. And Amy, I'm going to get you in on this specifically with the point of view of the United States, and I'm going to then broaden it to other countries as well. The US considered perhaps one of the beacons of freedom, liberty, and that's what the US is supposed to stand for. And now you're having, and one of the reasons why the US was so well known for that was the checks and balances. The executive, the state, the president can never go too far because there are checks and balances. Now that's going to be called into question. The fact that the head of the investigating agency can be fired just because he's probing Trump, people are going to wonder where this is going to end up.
Yeah, I think you're right, Vikram. Good evening to you and your audience. I think, you know, to me, one of the essences of a true and fully mature democracy is the idea that no one, no matter who they are, no matter whether they're the head of the state or the head of the government, is above the law. The law is above everybody, and everybody has to be held accountable to the law. And that there are institutions that are independent law enforcement agencies that are able to carry out impartial investigations and make determinations, you know, about whether a person has violated a law or is suspected of violating law, and they can be prosecuted.
Okay.
So I think that is really one of the core principles of a key democracy, and I think that's clearly one of the things that is now being questioned in the U.S. with the firing of Comey, you know, the head of the FBI.
That's being questioned, but I mean, I'm going to look at some of the key democratic values, and let's bring this up because I think this is a debate that we need to have. We need to have it around the world, and we certainly need to have it here in India as well. What are the core values of a democracy? Yogendra and Dhruv, I'm going to get you to weigh in on this in just a second or two. Let's take a look at the democracy checklist, if you like. Some countries have been better at these, some countries not doing that well. So first, most obvious, free and fair elections. Now that is the core of democracy, and let's apply these to different countries like the US, for example. But before we go further, let's look at the others. So there's free and fair elections, free and independent judiciary. That would be the next item I would put up. Feel free to add to that, folks, if you want. Free and an independent press. Free and independent. It's important. Number 4 would be checks and balances on state power. So a state or a government just can't do what it likes. There's some control about it. You don't, for example, control your own investigating agencies. And free speech. Here are just 5 of the items on the checklist. So would you add anything to that, or does that pretty much sum up core democratic values for you?
I mean, that's one way of looking at it, and I think that oftentimes the focus is on the mechanics of democracy and how a democracy ought to function. But there are many underlying elements that I think are equally deserving of attention. In some ways, the mechanics are only the end point of a fully functioning democracy. The philosopher Francis Fukuyama, he focuses on 3 different elements of it. One is state capacity, one is rule of law, and only the third is really the mechanics of democracy. And in his estimation, say a country like India does rather well on 2 of those 3 dimensions, but not on the state capacity part.
Okay, but Yogendra Yadav, if you take a look at that checklist, and let's keep going over that, I'm going to get P. N. Vijay in as well. Let's try applying this to see what's happening to democracies. Yogendra Yadav, take a look at that checklist from the point of view of the United States. Free and fair elections, yes, that's always been a given when it comes to the US, although now even that's coming under question, notably from the President Trump himself. He himself has questioned how free and fair the elections were. He's saying they were rigged. So that starts to put a question mark over it. Free and independent judiciary in the US, yes, almost certainly that would apply. Free and independent press in the US almost certainly is operating. In fact, they're being brave and courageous out there taking on the state. Checks and balances on state power. Now, in the US, that used to be considered one of the most important aspects of democracy. I would not have a tick there to that same extent as I would have had 4 or 5 days ago, because the fact that the president can just fire an FBI chief because he's investigating him, you start to worry. Free speech is very much there in the US as well. Now, if you were to apply that same yardstick, for example, to India, Yogendra, and I'm going to come to you on that, go through that checklist again. How would that apply to India? Free and fair elections, yes, although the Aam Aadmi Party theoretically is questioning that with its questions on the EVM. Free and independent judiciary, yes, almost certainly that is the case. Free and independent press, well, the Indian press has been free. Today there are some who is going to question whether it is as independent as it once was, or it should be, because the independence is coming into question. Checks and balances on state power, not quite that sure. Investigative agencies and all are controlled by the government. It runs the CBI, it runs other such things. Free speech, yes, it's there. You debate it, but it's very much there. How would you see those checklists operating, Yogendra, abroad and in India?
Vikram, in my previous birth, when I used to be political scientist, which I'm no longer, I did spend some time arguing against these checklists. And I used to argue that what these checklists do is that these are actually abstracted versions of the history of Europe and North America. So you look at these countries, say, oh my God, these are very good democracies. Now let me try and produce what are the common elements to these 6 or 7 or 8 countries which I think are democracies, and then we come up with a checklist like this. So I would actually endorse what Dhruv was hinting at. I think let's not confuse form with substance. These are forms. These are important forms. I would not ignore. In the case of European North American democracy, these are very critical forms. Now, you can sometimes have these forms and no substance. You sometimes can have substance without this form. So one has to be open to these. Specifically, I mean, you did say you were very confident America has free and independent judiciary. But you would remember, Vikram, the judges are known to be Republican judges and Democrat judges. I don't see in India judges being described as BJP judges or Congress judges. So there is something happening there which this checklist doesn't allow us to see. And on the independent elections, we heard something about Florida a few years ago, didn't we? And if that thing was reported about any other country in Africa, it would make a very interesting reading.
So no country, actually you're right. And if you look at the Economist list, US is not very high. It's at number 21, India is number 22. US is not very high, and the Economist has taken the United States off its list of full democracies and says it's a flawed democracy. P. N. Vijay, before I come back to what's happening around the world, would you share any of the concerns about democratic backsliding, and how do you see it here in India? I put up some of those checklists. Would you be concerned about the trends, or would you be confident that in India at least, and I'm going to ask specifically this question to you because you, after all, are the party which is in power here in India, are you fairly confident that all those core democratic values will always be safe in India? We'll never again have a repeat of what happened in '75, for example.
We really hope so, and I personally pray so, because of all the things that I'm proud of as an Indian, it's the democratic polity of the country. I'm sure the judiciary and the media are very free in this country. I'm sure that in other aspects of free speech, etc., we are pretty okay. As another gentleman said in this discussion, I'm worried about the manner in which the state exercises its powers. We have very good laws in India, but during implementation, very often personal liberties like prosecution of under trials and custodial deaths, etc., mar the copybook.
Okay.
So I think, as Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru once said, eternal vigilance is the price we pay for democracy. So all of us have to be on the guard, and whenever any authoritarian trend appears, we'll have to crush it with all our might. And also, I'll include, Vikram, right to property.
How are we going to, by the way,
we should also remember
just to take you on, who is going to be the person who's going to be crushing any? Here's the issue. Vikram. The threat to democratic values will essentially come if the state decides to take too many powers into itself and goes down an authoritarian path. I'm not saying your government is doing it or the next government is doing it, but it will always be the state that is doing it. And across the world, whether it is Hungary or Poland or Turkey or the US is being accused of doing it, it's always the state which starts to take more powers into its own hands. What happens then? In India, there are some people who will say, well, yeah, the judiciary is going to be vigilant and the press is going to be vigilant and civil society is going to be vigilant. But sometimes those institutions aren't as powerful as you think they are. They're not strong enough to stand up to the state taking more power into its own hands. P. N. Vijay.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it happened in 1975 under very extraordinary You're absolutely right. It happened in 1975 under very extraordinary circumstances when just for 2 years we lost our personal liberties. I don't rule out the possibility in the next 100 years it might happen. A free civil society, a free judiciary notwithstanding, or some army chief may get some ideas. So, being a poor country, we have all these hidden threats. But I do believe that we have a very strong system which can repeatedly combat authoritarian tendencies. I think we have to nip it in the bud and have to be vigilant, cutting across political parties.